Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today our guest is Victoria Vdovychenko. She is a program director for security studies at the Center for Defense Strategies. Welcome, Victoria.
Lovely seeing you, Sergej. So delighted to be here with you.
Thank you for your time and for your insights. You're working intensively with military and defense cooperation between Ukraine and the West. What are the prospects of Ukraine for this year? We have seen a lot of different signals. Stop of ammunition supplies from the US, different talks regarding Taurus supply from Germany. Will the West supply Ukraine what Ukraine needs for its victory?
Oh my God, Sergej, it's a $1 billion question, if not more, because it's not even a question for me as a Ukrainian representative. It's much better the question to our, let's say, European counterparts or partners, because from our side we are definitely ready to both receive the military aid and support and supply of all possible ammo, but also far-launch missiles, in particular that you mentioned. Your country, in Germany, is making intensive debates whether to exchange the Taurus to the British Storms and then to, in such a way, to overcome, let's say, the political shape and political discussions or dilemmas for some of the representatives still to support Ukraine on time. Because as a matter of fact, Sergej, it's very important that we do that on time and as soon as possible. And it's not about as long as it takes formula, it's now. And as you know, when we are talking about military cooperation in particular and planning and delivery on time is a kind of a very essential thing to support not only the militaries but also civilians in Ukraine, which are literally making sure that each and every drone attack or missile attack is not hitting their homes for this moment. And that's why political dimension of the discussions, which ammunition, but also in particular which military aid to provide to Ukraine. It's something that has been long debated, and that's why the length of this discussion sometimes is immeasurable. In Ukrainian framework, time is a very different concern, and we make sure that our response is making it as quick as possible. Of course, we definitely understand the partners in the West that will take much more time politically to negotiate and discuss these matters in particular. I only mentioned Germany, but it's not only the one country that we have to talk about. Of course, UK, we have to talk then a priority for, let's say, creative approach sometimes that even the Minister of Foreign Affairs, David Cameron, was making it sure that talking to her vis-a-vis Annalena Baerbock, making sure that this request for the exchange of the missiles was never something done before. So it's a very creative approach, the partners thinking about the future of Ukraine and also their future to some extent. Of course, here is the talks about France and his again announcement in the upcoming weeks to still visit Kyiv. As you know, the visit was planned to be in February, but then was cancelled. Still, after the talks with Volodymyr Zelensky himself with President Macron, make sure that President Macron will make it happen. So we literally think that this visit is not only political momentum of when France and Ukraine signed the security assurances, but it's a kind of a concrete, what we say, how these security assurances are making sure they are transformed into the action plan with concrete deadlines, concrete, let's say, indicators, and concrete cooperation in this sense. We know that our partners from the Baltic states and Poland are making their efforts to do so as well. And it's not a secret that Baltic states representatives, in particular Estonia is now, where Sergej is coming from, is elaborating the framework for the security assurances with Ukraine. So something that we expect more countries, in a nutshell, in March, April, and May, to sign with Ukraine the security assurances, which are sometimes politically set as security guarantees, but to make sure that it's not somehow the same thing that we are talking about. And we have to mention also one more partner, which is definitely from the Scandinavian and Sweden and Finland and Norway, so three countries from the, let's say, Scandinavian profile, which important to mention, not only Finland, but now Sweden is a member of the NATO, so we do have the Baltic states being protected by what we say NATO Lake. So the cooperation with this country intensifies with Ukraine, also with security assurances, but also military aid that these countries are providing. But on the south side, from what we say the old members of the EU, Italy is one of the very interesting partner now, trying to elaborate its framework, not only politically, but also, as we understand, economically, how to boost presence of its efforts. And just on another side, very important question here to answer is not only the military aid, but how Ukraine will be able to economically recover. And that's
Indeed, and these are all the questions you have already. Sorry for interrupting you. You have already mentioned so many countries and so many constellations.
Sorry. My job and my domain that we have to travel geographically is so important. One thing that I didn't mention still is United States, but I think it will be a separate question for you to ask.
Absolutely. I want to stop at each and every country out of them, but before we do that, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. And if you subscribe, you get informed about the next interviews, which is also an interesting option. We are talking to Victoria Vdovychenko, who is a program director for Security Studies Center for Defense Strategies. You have mentioned already security assurances for Ukraine signed by several countries. But the best and biggest security assurance or even guarantee which Ukraine can get is a NATO membership. And NATO membership is now like not something what Ukraine obviously will get very soon, but Ukraine moves towards it. And we see that NATO expands and new members like Finland or Sweden get into NATO or under NATO protection. What are Ukraine's perspectives here?
Oh, sorry, it's another $1 billion question, but politically speaking, if the first one was financially speaking, then this one is a political speaker, because there is no limit for Ukraine to go on with not only Euro-Atlantic reform agenda, but also continuing to will to be a NATO member. But we have to talk about specific member states inside the NATO and the political willingness of the NATO to accept Ukraine. That's, I believe, it's something that you are asking, and we as Ukrainians asking ourselves. So when, how, under which perspectives? Of course, everyone from Ukraine, civil society in particular, looks on the July agenda. July is the time for annual, but this time very memorial 75th NATO Washington summit. And we were thinking, so apart from writing the security assurances with Ukraine, US could make a much more of a message, not only NATO member states, but united with the member states to other parts of the world, saying that not only Ukraine will be a member, but Ukraine will be a member of NATO when and how. That's the precision framework. So when, how, it means by which conditions. Yeah, that's something that we are very much expecting and working on intensively with our partners as a civil society organization, think tank, in other countries, with the organization, for example, but with other others from the NATO member states, in order to make sure that we elaborate this understanding and the timely concern that we already talked about. Because, yes, we already have a Vilnius communique or Vilnius declaration last year when the annual NATO summit was taken on, with the perspective of Ukraine somehow, when we don't know, to become a NATO member state. But we want to make sure that it happens already, and there are already not only economic but also political preconditions to that. Of course, our eyes look more to what we say Atlantic partner of NATO. United States in particular, where the concerns are that Ukraine is not ready and it might be ready to join NATO only after or when Ukraine wins and have a full victory. And this precision to have a full victory itself and to win, that's something that we as Ukrainians see as already being a precondition of being a member state of NATO. So it should happen in a parallel tracks. I want to maybe foresee some of the questions that, Sergej, you might think, or your audience who will be listening to this podcast in particular might see. Well, there is a kind of a stereotype, or at least it used to be a stereotype before, that the expansion of NATO was the precondition why the Russian Federation attacked Ukraine, right? So it was a very common knowledge for a lot of communities in 2022, but also in 2023. As a picture now in 2024, I might say two arguments that are against that. Firstly, Finland already became a partner, or actually a member, to be precisely, of NATO, so expanding its borders, and NATO literally being on the borders with the Russian Federation, but Sweden as well. Did something happen to them? Not at all. So it means that this idea that sometimes politically blocks, or sometimes some expert societies blocks to the vision to have a full victory of Ukraine, at least to help Ukraine in order to gain this full victory. We say that these arguments that the expansion of NATO was used as something why the Russian Federation attacked shouldn't be the argument as well in 2024. The argument should be why Ukraine is not still winning with all together. So what it makes sure, or how to make sure that Ukraine not only wins but have a full victory. These, I believe, are the key questions that we should ask our Western partners. But we as Ukrainian experts make sure that we are providing necessary not only questions but answers to that.
What we observe now with this military aid for Ukraine looks like a bad joke when every country points at others and say, yeah, they deliver even less than we did, or we cannot deliver more, or we plan to deliver more but not now, etc. Maybe besides of the Baltic countries, which have already sent to Ukraine everything what they had, or Czechia, which is already looking for any ammunition shell, any artillery shell, in the world which is available. Other countries just find it
progressive, Sergej, that Mr. Pavel already informed that he found the funding already for all of this ammo. So it means that the money is not the question. That's
absolutely, and the other countries
the question or for you and for the audience. You know, sometimes people think that the question is the funding. These arguments of Mr. Pavel, the president of Czechia, just proved that the funding is not the question itself.
So what is the question?
Well, definitely when we're talking about the procurement system, and of course how the ammo, if we talk about the ammo, let's say, should be produced and then supplied to Ukraine, it takes definitely time, and the preparation for that should have been started, which is the case. But it's true that those, let's say, ammos that already been delivered to Ukraine, they were in stock of the countries that were providing them, and they vacated their stocks, that's for sure. That's why EU is thinking about enhancing their industrial defense capacity, as we know, and there is also the strategy to do that, and there is also an idea to have a special commission on that, an open office in Kyiv. What stops that? Well, interest, definitely, as we say, sometimes political interest, because it provokes also the questions simultaneously to many European communities who, as we know, also go on elections, apart from not only United States, potentially UK as well, we don't know, we will know in the upcoming weeks, to explain the question of conscription, because if we expand the defense capabilities and productions, and potentially politicians are not sometimes ready to answer the questions of conscription, for example, so to boosting the production is it only for Ukraine, or is it how it potentially might be used and for what? The societies in Europe, I'll be talking in Europe in general, so not only EU, they are very much accommodated with the democracy, and sometimes democracy makes it so comfortable, which we definitely understand, and that's what Ukrainians truly want. But in order to be potentially safeguard this democracy, we need these capabilities to be present. And it also involves training of personnel, because capabilities without personnel and thinking about logistical chains, how they're going to be supported and supplied, that's something that should be considered as well. War is mathematics as well, so it's definitely about numbers, how much of what and when. So the time concern, the volume concern, but also the times when the production lines can be elaborated. That's something that is on our agenda as well. And to make this very, maybe my vague answer to you, but at the same time with some concrete messages, Ukrainians are very open, and we do believe that Miltech production in Ukraine is one of the solutions. But we also need the transition solutions as of now, because in order to win as soon as possible, we need already the solutions to be elaborated and being implemented now. And this term now is not as soon as it takes, but it's now already definitely as a very something concrete. So that's why my prospects for 2024, which might be, it is a challenging year for sure, is that when the political leaders are coming to Ukraine and making their discussions, we are discussing a very concrete action plans in these concerns and in these domains in particular.
If you compare the largest economies of Europe, we know more or less the position of Germany, with a strange stance of German Chancellor, but still the position is pretty clear. We know the development in the position of France. We know the position of the UK. But what is about Italy, a country which promised by their prime minister a lot of support for Ukraine, but obviously is not sending that much arms and ammunition to Ukraine? What is going on in Italy?
Sergej, it's absolutely fair enough question, especially after Sergej Sumlenny recent visit to Kiev at the end of February, just commemorating the second year of the full-scale invasion, where exactly the signing of the security assurance between Ukraine and Italy happened. We made sure that Italy is in the face or represented by Giorgia Meloni, is something that every Italian thinks about, which is not the case. This is sometimes the problem. And to tell you the truth, it's something that we are, as Ukrainian civil society and think tank representatives, tries to work with Italian vis-a-vis, so civil society organizations and the think tanks. And we try to explain to our Italian counterparts that historically had very different legacy of paternalism, the different legacy of pacifism, these terms that echoed so much, let's say, century for Italian society. It's it takes time to transform these efforts. So, of course, politically, as you know, Giorgia Meloni's party is still back on track, and definitely, but she has a very different and interesting partner in her coalition, like the party Lega, who just re-signed or continued in 2023 the memorandum with Единая Россия, for example, for 5 more years. So that, and it's hard to keep everyone in balance when you have such a partner on your back, to literally sometimes to make you a problem. And we know that taking into account that Italian story of the coalitions is a very fragile one, for a moment we do expect that the coalition under Giorgia Meloni will continue. For example, just today there were announced the polls from one of the local elections that Italy was having this Sunday in Abruzzo, one of the regions of Italy, where her party is still gaining a lot of weight, so they are winning. But and some of the parties in the oppositions are losing, which makes sure that the narrative is there. But as you know, Sergej, normally people do not think about foreign policy or military aid, but they think about very, domestic, what we say, agenda. So foreign policy is not something that is being prioritized in many areas. So that's why it's very difficult to talk with the Italians, and that's why it's very difficult sometimes to convince the politicians from Italy, to expand and vote for subsequent military packages for Ukraine. One of them was very long awaited. It was voted, but it took more than half a year to vote for that in two chambers of Italian parliament. So which means that not only Giorgia Meloni, but you need much more, what we say, those supporters of Ukraine who explain it in a proper Italian language, if we talk about Italy, but it's the case also to many other countries, to the politicians, to their voters or potential voters, why it is not only about the military package for Ukraine, it's about actually security assurance for Italy as well, to some extent, right? So it's making sure that the idea of not only Russian aggression but Russian propaganda, which literally paint and picked Italian society in particular in the last month, is something that they should think about. Just in this, just in the last point about the Russian propaganda in Italy, it's not something new, as a matter of fact, and I'm as a scholar, I'm working in these issues long years, but just for several months, January and particularly February and the beginning of March, we literally seen the boost of some of the campaigns, what we say, subtle propaganda, which you don't see, let's say, very easily. But when you listen to the messages or the narrative that comes within the media sometimes, then you understand how this subtle Russian propaganda works in a nutshell, because then it's three ideas mostly: making the Italian society doubtful about the support to Ukraine, making it doubtful about the efforts of Ukraine to win and to have a victory. As you know, these are two different things. And then making it doubtful to have one more member of EU or plus NATO in particular, as Ukraine expanding its boundaries. In Italian societies, in particular in central and southern Italy, it's very hard to explain Italians why NATO, in a nutshell, should be expanded to the east, because they see that still, historically, as expansion to the east is something that Russia will be attacking. And no arguments like Sweden and Finland still do not work for Italian society. So we have to elaborate new messages, or new message box, if you say, in order to work with the societies. And taking into account that Italian society is very volatile in terms of elections, so that's why constant work, and not only with the northern regions of Italy, but also with the central and southern regions of Italy, where the voters are coming from. And those voters, for example, who might go to the European parliamentary elections in particular, they need these explanatory efforts that Ukrainian think tanks are doing.
And that is not what one could expect from Italy. As we know, Italy has a huge Ukrainian diaspora ahead all the time, and one could expect that Ukrainians have pretty much, if not influence in Italy, but many Italian families know Ukrainians personally, so they could be immune to Russia's propaganda narratives about bad Ukrainians, Nazi Ukrainians, etc. But after all, we still see Russia's influence in Italy too, despite all the fierce pro-Ukrainian rhetorics of Prime Minister Meloni. But if we go to other countries which stay as obstacles on the way of support for Ukraine, much more than any other, if we look at Hungary or since recently Slovakia, what are the situations there? Is there any chance for taming of these pro-Russian politicians like Mr. Orban or Mr. Fico?
Well, Sergej, this is how democracy works, in all of the society, in particular in the EU, right? That everyone has possibility to present its own idea. So definitely we've seen it in December in the European Council Summit 14-15 in December 2023, when there was a specific position of Viktor Orban that didn't or that, let's say, blocked to some extent the efforts of not only let's say, funding Ukraine facility track, but also funding the EU. As we know, it was a constraint for a multi-year financial framework that all of the representatives in the European Summit had to be voted for. So it happened, as we know, on the 1st of February. Now, as you know, next week we're going to have one more summit that will be definitely discussing so-called framework of negotiations between Ukraine and EU. Do we expect that Slovakia and Hungary will make it, kind of a political campaign? Yes, for sure. Do we expect that it might be a problem? Well, to some extent, yes, but at the same time, we are also looking for the recommendation what European Commission is saying, because the EU as an institution has also a vote in this process. If we're talking about, let's say, the efforts of Ukraine and EU to join each other's or make themselves closer, so opening of negotiations, or let's say official framework opening for the negotiations, will start only next week if we're going to have this summit efficiently on March 18, 19, 20 to be precisely. On the bilateral level, for sure, that takes two to tango, as we say, right? So, and you've, or our viewers have seen, or maybe made sure that they could see these meetings they were making happen between Minister Kuleba and or our Prime Minister in Uzhgorod, not even in Kiev, because the Hungarian representatives were afraid that it might be too dangerous in Kiev, so they found a spot on the border in one of the cities in Ukraine, which is literally at the border with Hungary, to have such a meeting, which was a creative format, but at the same time making sure that the continuous diplomatic work and on as it should be. The same happened with Slovakia, as you know. Also, there were meetings in Uzhgorod, but with Slovakia is also somehow problematic politically, as well as in Hungary, because there is one rhetoric that the politicians are saying to their societies, there is another rhetoric that they are saying to the EU communities, and there is a third rhetoric that we hear in the diplomatic talks, and they are all three different. So if you meet a leader of I don't know, Germany, France, Italy, Sweden, Spain, the rhetoric between the EU and these bilateral countries will be almost the same, which is not the case when we talk about Hungary and Slovakia, right? Because there is an idea that communities should have something spicy or juicy for themselves, something that is different to the EU institutions, and make it a PR campaign, and then something that is being literally told with Ukrainian vis-a-vis. So yes, problematic. Dead end? No, definitely no.
Well, a lot of challenges in front of Ukraine on both the ways with relations to towards the EU and NATO, all bilateral relations, also with close neighbors. We didn't mention Poland as well. Also not the best relations recently with all the blockade of the food trucks. A lot of challenges, a lot of hard work in the future months and probably years. It was Victoria Vdovychenko with her insights. She's a program director for security studies at the Center for Defense Strategies. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thanks to you, Sergej, and thanks everyone for watching and listening to us.
And don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. If you subscribe, you get informed about the new interviews. Stay strong, stay with Ukraine, stay tuned.
And that's how you will know about Ukraine more.